This will be the first video in a series of 2 or 3 that will show the Viking 140T installation in a Zenith 650 low wing. This airplane that came in had an 0235 Lycoming, and we did a conversion. This video will be an overview of little things as we went along, how we did it, and so forth and so on. So use this to get started building, and as far as actual final details of the final airplane flying and all the little things that was tweaked will be video number 2, and it'll be showing in sequence every installation step that we did and how we did it for a flying and successful airplane. Then there will be performance video after that. So far we drained the fuel, did the weight and balance, or basically got some weights. Took the canopy off to make it easier, got rid of the turtle deck. Now we're trimming all the tie wraps off so we can get to everything. And I'm starting to disconnect some things from the firewall. Alright, so we continued on with the ducting, fuel, and breather. Engine, bus, and all the cables for that, and the starter or magneto switch is out. We've got battery disconnected, throttle cable, and so throttle and mixtures and fuel. So we'll get the engine off. Okay, so we'll weigh the, what's that, 0320?
0235.
0235 as it came off the plane. All right, got everything zeroed. 0 pounds, a little bit of glare there. Yep, all right, bring her up. 290. All right, 290 pounds for an 0235 right off the airplane. Okay, so we weigh the baby turbo. You want to lift her up? Looks good. Let's see what we got. 241, and that's with oil and the turbocharger, which is the exhaust, and all that. All right, so the engine is off. It was 290 pounds, and we got it on a pallet. Somebody wants that one. This one was 240 with oil and everything in it. That's ready to go back on. We're working on the firewall. Get the blanket back off and get rid of any little bit of small pieces of corrosion, but nothing really serious. And cleaning it up and priming it. Okay, so we sealed off the firewall. We're going to do a steel bungee, and then we're ready for an engine mount. We decided to put in the steel bungee. Cut away the original bungee. It didn't really fail, we just cut it because it was a good time to upgrade to the steel bungee now when the firewall's clean. So we got new cotter pins in there. Put in the straps for the steel bungee. dropped assembly down in there and marked and drilled our holes, tensioned it, and ready to go. All right, so we have the motor mount or engine mount in place, and next thing is to actually put the engine on the firewall. Okay, we have a hanging engine. It sure looks a lot smaller than the one that came out. It's just a tiny little thing compared to this guy. That's a lot of engine in comparison. So what we did on this one, we added 4 washers to get the engine within level to 1 degree down, and that should be good. So you level it based on the longerons here, and just pick any kind of level surface on the engine, like bracket for the mount here, or a machine surface on the gearbox or something, and that's your leveling. All right, we've done a few other things. Wanted dual throttles, so we had to patch some holes here for where the vents were, and then we actually just glued the vents right into the fiberglass, and that gave us a place to put the cables. He wanted one on each side, so we got that done. This one, it's like a 5-footer, and that's like 80-inch on that side, and it's coming underneath here. Yeah, actually we ran it through over here, and across along the engine mount, and we tied them both together over here. They kind of come together here. Everything is loomed with a high temp loom, and then we set up the mechanism here, being able to do dual throttles in there, and then our mechanism up here for the engagement of the throttle. All right, so that's all in and it's working. We also did the fuel line. Goes underneath there. Everything that goes underneath there gets tucked right up against, there's a couple of clamps here, and everything else gets tucked to it in order to stay far away from the throttle as it moves up and down. And then the fuel hose, we went over here, and we have our fuel manifold right here. So we're coming in with 2 hoses from the header tank, and we have no brakes in those hoses. And we're going to hook up the header tank inside in a little bit here. But we're doing 2 hoses out to here because there's pump 1 and pump 2, and we don't want any fittings inside. And then they come out here. And we did the pressure transducer for the Viking view out to the engine, check valve from one pump, check valve from the other pump, and a bleed orifice for high pressure to bleed back to the intake side after shutdown. Let's see, anything else we did? We did add a bottle here. I think we covered that. And we added the bottle for the coolant down here. So that's done. So far so good. We also did add this hose out of the turbo. And we added the hose for the actuator to work and push the turbocharger open when we get to the pressure, predetermined pressure of about 65 inches. So this had an 0235 engine, so interesting to see how much this steel or lead weight or whatever this is weighs. So let's pull that out. Yeah, this definitely would have killed you in a crash. It's held by 2 tiny little screws, and it would have come flying into your neck. That's absolutely crazy. wasn't attached at all in the back. All right, we're doing a few things a little bit different on the 650s just to make it easier to install. So we have the battery tray like right here, which is super easy to work. You just basically plop your butt on the ground. Lots of room back here. And our battery tray, we put a little angle. We just put a riveted little angle there. And then set it on the existing shelf here. Put a bolt AN3 up there and an AN3 down here. And that secured the whole thing. So now we put the contactors and the batteries here. We have a grounding bus on the other side. Actually, we put a grounding stud back here so we can put the big battery cable or grounding cable. And then we have, we're going to put our battery cable here to go to the firewall. So this positive will go to the firewall, and then the ground one will go to the firewall. And then this being bolted down, because we have a stud, like I said, let me see if I can get it right there. So it's grounding the airframe. Once this is bolted fore and aft. And we got our 30 amp fuse right there. So from that side, we're gonna run a number 10 up front, and that'll be for the airplane, for anything, positive bus for anything in the airplane. And then the ECU, we're not gonna come off this bus here. We'll come off of the firewall, where the positive goes through the firewall. We're gonna have a stud in the firewall. Other than that, it's all finished and wired like our other airplanes. Okay, so we got a stud through the firewall. We got 2 separate straps going to the engine, just to have redundancy. And we get some loom put on that because that will chafe like crazy. It's very flexible, which is good. We're also going to use flexible welding cable with multi-strand, lots of strands, from here to the alternator, and from here down to the starter. All right, so we just keep trucking along. I just put the intercooler in, so basically that needs to be done by just carefully size everything, the length across here. Different clamps, like these are 48 to 51. Same with that one. The first one here is a little bit smaller, 44 to 47. And that's just because the turbocharger housing is a little bit smaller. But it goes on, it's a little bit tougher. And then we switch to 44 to 47 on these two and this one. And then you get down here, and these two are different. Those are 52 to 55 millimeters. And okay, so we cut 3/4 of an inch off here, left full length here. We're able to get enough room behind here for the heater hoses. They could also run in here and up. We ran them here, probably could have also run them there, but we do have room, and we're gonna protect them. And then once we had this set, the right angle, level with the, kind of like with the top of the engine, and it's level with this, 90 here. We have about 4 inches in here. We ended up with a little bit further out here, but that all worked out fine. And then we put our Adel, stainless steel Adel clamp here, and we drilled for here, making sure we had clearance on the inside here of the engine mount. We did have one little bit of interference on the throttle cable, so we put a little dab of right stuff for silicone against the intercooler on the inside, and that worked out fine. I don't normally do that, but it worked out just fine because it's not binding the cable or anything like that. And then the cables, throttle cables, to just continue on, and we did the dual throttle here, as you saw earlier. All right, that's a little bit more for today. The back, each side of the tank, we welded on some bungs. we wanted to not have to cut a floor hole in this airplane. So it just sits on the floor. In order to clear the rudder pedals, we got some new low profile screws right here. That worked out real nice. Cables now go on top of that. And it fit in nicely. We did have to, like we always do on the controls back here, just take the heim joints and move them behind, and then make sure you got the right amount of spacers so that they move freely, rather than having them on the front side here. We put them on the back side and then just test the controls, and that allows for enough room for the tank to sit up against the front here, the kick plate or heel plate. And then we basically just held the tank by using one of the pipe plugs, and the tank is still just slightly loose, but we wanted to just hold it down. So the pipe plug is tight. We have a little washer in here and a bar, and that just holds the tank from moving around up there. Obviously the pipe plug has to be tight first, and holding the tank down is secondary, so we can seal the pipe thread. Here's the original gasculator hole. This one we're going to put because we're going to have a radiator here now, and we're just put a 90 in here temporarily for now, until we add a 4-inch extension back here for a drain, so that the drain is aft of the radiator. All right, that was it for installing that. Now we're going to run the hoses up to the engine. So we have been trucking along, getting a lot done. We installed the intercooler with its bracket here. Got the hoses going in the back, and also here on the side. We installed the temperature probe for in and out of the intercooler, as well as all the wiring for the coolant temperature, gearbox temperature, oil pressure. We did a remote setup there. We did a high pressure filter here. We no longer use that last high pressure filter. There's a filter from each tank before the header tank, and then each pump inside the header tank has a little filter on it. It's larger than what we used in the past, these onboard filters. So we don't use another filter. So this filter that you're seeing here gets removed or not installed. Put our fuel splitter and all that stuff right there, with the bleed back, the check valves and so forth. We got the, like we said, the tank all mounted now. Did not have to put a hole in the floor. Got that streamlined, and then underneath we added the drain. We did put that 4 inches further back. Get that ready. Probably we'll put a dab of silicone in the back there for vibration, and then the radiator will go on top of that. So we had to have that done. We did get the wires strung in here for cables. There's plenty of room for positive and negative, so we could put the batteries in the back. So we had a little advantage here where we took this existing cowling and we laid it on top of the one that we're working on right now. Making sure that the engine was level with the longeron, we started fitting the cowling. We just did all the cutouts the same, exhaust in the back as the existing cowling there. And we usually use piano hinges everywhere, but you know, this airplane's already set up with nice riv nuts in the back and across here. So we'll just reuse those, and then we'll put hinges along the edges. Should be a fairly easy setup. Okay, so we put the radiator in place. Very simple. Just rivet these to the bottom. We put 3 AN5s along those. Had to do a little cutting just to make it fit, but you'll see that. And then, well, that's bottom, so this will be the top. And there's nothing really to do on the top other than installing this cross brace. We got a couple of notches here for the Zenith floor stringer, and we just laid something over here to make sure it's absolutely flat with that. and put a bead of right stuff on the other side so we don't have a leak of air going through. And that's it. Air will come in over here, and then it's trapped in between these three walls and goes down through the radiator. Now you'll see some videos where this is all faired in back here. I don't think that makes any difference. We usually just leave it open now. It's easier to drain the tank, the header tank, and also creates just a little bit of turbulence to get more air through the radiator. Okay, so we did some fuel work. Airplane had some 1/4-inch hoses, so we took those out, and also it went kind of uphill, leaving the tank to some transducers. So it went uphill about 2.5 inches, or maybe 2. So we wanted to stay straight. So we changed it to 5/16, checked the fuel strainers, they were fine. And then we made an inspection hole behind here, but it's really just a slot. And we're able to do that between these two ribs here. Between that, we were able to get a hole in the next rib up inside here. And after that, it's right into the airplane. And we're able to get the hose much lower. So no uphill, straight from the tank to the header tank through the filters. And we added the forward-facing 90s to the fuel vents, and those are necessary to put a little bit of pressure in the tank, push that fuel reliably to the header tank. Some of the tools we used, we just used like a 20mm hole saw to make the slot, and a jigsaw with a carbide dust blade to cut the slot out, and then any kind of an extension to drill the 3/4-inch hole. We ended up with a fuse thing here because of what we had around. Tack welded a 3/4-inch hole maker, unibit to the end there, and we were able to cut the slot there and then make the holes, actually both holes, this one and the one all the way in the airplane, with one extension. And then we put the 3/4-inch outside diameter grommets, plastic grommets in those, and then ran the hose. Alright, and here we are. We're just going to make that hole, and we'll make the one all the way into the airplane. Worked on getting the fuel hoses in the right way. So we lowered it, like we show in the videos already, to the lowest point on the firewall there. Doesn't have to be any lower than, you know, the tank, but nothing can be higher than that. So we didn't lower the tank in the floor this time. We just stayed with the exact same height the whole way, which means this is only 1 inch higher than the tank, and 1 quart of fuel will actually flow here. So what we did is we stayed with that exact same height. We didn't have any ups or downs or any flow transducers or filters or anything out in the wing. Just came straight through the bulkheads, and in here we're about 3 inches from the floor here. We're 4 inches from the floor here. We're 3.5 inches on this one from the floor. That clears. There's 2 layers to go through. That'll clear the spar caps on both sides. Just goes through this thin metal. And here's the back side, and it's above the spar cap. No big deal there. There's lots of other things running through, like brake lines and stuff. And we do a 90 here. We have the filter, made sure we have the right direction on the flow on the filter. And then we did the same on the other side, another 90. So 90 there, and a 90 there, and a 90 over here. And so basically just measure it out. Looked like for us, it was like the second rivet here from the console, maybe the third if the console wasn't there. Yep, 1, 2, 3, and then we did the first rivet from here straight down. Basically just put the 90s in the filter and measure it all out. And we did grommets, grommet here, grommet on the other side, so 4 grommets. And it turned out really nice. Easy to replace the filters. Quick disconnects. And now we're gonna see how it flows into the header tank. All right, so here we see we put a vent in the top. We didn't go to the outboard end of the tank because that's too difficult with a finished airplane. But there was an extra bung here on the top of the inboard part of the tank. So we ran a 1/4 inch hose from there. We put a loom on it because it's riding on the ribs, the cutouts in the ribs. And no, that's the feed line that we already did earlier. We showed that. So now what we did in order to get air out of the header tank, which is important, is we ran that, you know, we've got the lines we showed earlier. This one on the other side, they just go through the thin shear web here. And then we have our filters in the back. And we showed that. We got the quick disconnects and everything. So that's all at the same height, which is important. An inch up and 1 inch down makes a difference when you're working with a low wing. And then we put this 90° in here. We did put some Teflon brake line on here just in case it were to touch it. And we ran a 1/4 inch vent line just to get air off the top of the header tank. And it happened to be a grommet in this bracket for the controls. We ran it through there, pretty much at the same height as the tank. And then we popped another hole here. Let's see if I can focus. Yep, right there. And that's at the height of the bottom of the lightning holes in the ribs. And then we put some lube on the hose and went straight to the top of the tank out there, and that gives us that vent. And here you can see again how we lowered the original hose because it went uphill. All right, now we should be able to open all the faucets and have fuel flow into the header tank and air escape back to the wing. Close this up. It's always a lot more work working on an existing airplane. You know, a lot of wires everywhere that you don't know what, but we tidied up everything best we knew how. And so we did there's a ground bus here now, a nice new one. Power bus over here. We have an avionics bus on this side. So everything is starting to get organized, at least to that point. Avionics bus right there. Already had a bunch of breakers, so that was good. We could use them. We added some fuel gauges so you can see the fuel level in the tanks. And added the heater. Basically put a brace over like that. We just got the heater wiring made up, the harness for that. And there was a big hole in the panel here, so sometimes the lathe comes in handy. We made a little washer for that, so we could take up that hole out of Delrin. And now we're just kind of ready to put we got our pass through here for the ground. And then we got a ground wire there for our grounding bus. And we have the main power right here that comes from the back. And we have a wire from there to go to our power bus. And ECU, the primary wiring for the ECU is also right here. In fact, we don't have anything from here to our power bus. This is the ECU wire and the main power from the back. And then the power for the airplane power bus is right here, and that's this cream and purple colored wire that comes from the 30 amp fuse in the back that powers that. So we think we're done in here. We're going to do a little testing, plug in the headsets, radios, get everything test it as much as we can. Hopefully when we put the cover on, we don't have to go back in. We did learn on this second installation of a flying 650 that there are different fuel injectors on different models of these engines. So we just need to know when we ship the engine what year you have. This will be a 2023 model, and so it just needs slightly different tuning in the software based on the year model of engine. We completed this part here. This is a stainless steel part back here because it runs close to the exhaust. We finished our exhaust hanger system, which is basically a bracket that we make, a universal bracket. And then we use a piece of threaded rod out of all things. And we lock the rod to the bracket, and then we have a couple of nuts locking this to this clamp, and then 2 more nuts to lock this clamp for the exhaust. And it's really kind of easier to leave these screws out until the end because to get all this stuff together, you know, kind of plan it out, which clamp to put on first to get it all to go together. And then snug these at the end because that's able to slide back and forth as well. And then we stuck a piece of silicone underneath this clamp to support that. And we lifted this up a little bit by putting this tie wrap underneath here and adding this here. And that's good. And then this is now free to float a little bit here because we're leaving the vibrating engine to the airframe. And we're also making sure that we have clearance down here for the steering, which we do. All right, so with this General Motors engine on the prototype airplane that's been flying for quite a while, we try to just use everything that was there by General Motors. And one thing that is in their hose is this tiny little check valve. And it goes in this hose right here just after it leaves the pump. Honda, their pump says they have a check valve built into the pump, so no high pressure can feed back from this high pressure pump into this low pressure line. Now, for those of you that haven't seen Viking aircraft engine's most famous video of all times, according to the clock anyhow, or the number, it's just how to remove an Oetiker clamp. So there's lots of brutal ways we can cut this and all that, but there's a simple way too. You can get some really sharp diagonal pliers. You can buy these by the 10 pack at Amazon. And then you have this little tab right here, and if you've studied, you'll see it's bending this way. So we're going to go to this corner and that side of the tab, and then just gently bend up this corner. Once we get the corner bent up, we can peel it off, and that's the whole process of removing the clamp. And here you see what we're shipping now. It's just the General Motors, about a foot of their original hose that already has the check valve in it, and then we use a mender to convert to our 5/16 hose to go to the airplane. All right, so we got our little pieces that we're going to use to baffle the radiator. As you can see down there, we've got the cutout done, which gives us tons of airflow up into the radiator. And then now we're going to close off the flat part of that, which is the part that we don't want. We don't want air from the engine compartment going through the radiator, because that's hot air. So we lay this in there, and we're going to move it to where we want it. Obviously, it's going to be up to the firewall, a little bit more than that, and then we're going to rivet it in place, and we'll take a look at it afterwards. All right, so we've been doing some flying. Right now we're putting in these little baffles and going up to test those. We noticed a little spot here, so keep an eye out, for little things that might be touching. And in this case, we believe that on the airplane, which will be the same engine as this guy, that it's that little bit of thing sticking out there. So now we can cut a little bit of that away because that doesn't do anything in the airplane application.